Serena Jenkins navigated the cacophonous hallways of Northwood High with a practiced ease that belied her status as the new girl. At 16, she was tall, slender, and possessed a quiet grace that often made her seem to glide rather than walk. Her dark, expressive eyes, usually downcast or fixed on the dog-eared pages of a paperback, held an ancient wisdom that belied her youth. Northwood, a town nestled amidst rolling, unremarkable hills, was the kind of place where change was viewed with suspicion, and a newcomer, especially one as conspicuously quiet as Serena, became an immediate subject of cautious scrutiny. She was a black girl in a predominantly white provincial high school, an anomaly that drew stares, whispers, and a pervasive subtle curiosity she desperately sought to deflect. Her routine was a meticulously crafted shield against interaction. In the bustling cafeteria, she'd seek out the most obscure table, a forgotten corner near the humming vending machines, and immerse herself in a book, its worn cover a visible barrier. She didn't seek company, didn't engage in small talk, and never, ever made eye contact that lingered for more than a fleeting second. Her lunch, a neatly packed sandwich and a piece of fruit, was consumed with a quiet efficiency, her focus unwavering from the fictional worlds within her pages. In classrooms, she gravitated towards the last row, close to a window if possible, where she could either gaze out at the unchanging landscape or simply blend into the periphery, becoming another anonymous figure against the backdrop of the blackboard. She kept a hoodie perpetually pulled over her head, its soft fabric a comforting shroud, and tiny Bluetooth earbuds nestled invisibly in her ears. They weren't always playing music. Sometimes they were just there, a silent declaration of her unavailability, a personal soundproof booth against the intrusive clamor of teenage life. This self-imposed solitude wasn't a sign of shyness, but a deliberate choice, a deep-seated need for anonymity that had been honed by experiences far beyond the typical concerns of high school drama. She was a silent observer, a phantom moving through the daily rituals of school, her presence acknowledged only by the briefest of glances, quickly dismissed as unremarkable. Beneath this carefully constructed veneer of quiet disinterest, however, thrummed a formidable spirit, a resilience forged in fires unknown to these placid halls. She wasn't weak. She was merely a sentinel of her own peace, guarding a past she hoped would forever remain a secret. One blustery Tuesday afternoon, as the bell shrieked, unleashing a torrent of students into the crowded main hallway, chaos reigned. Lockers slammed, laughter echoed, and the hurried footsteps created a dizzying din. Amidst the rush, a smaller student, perhaps a timid seventh grader, stumbled. His arms, laden with a precarious stack of textbooks, flailed wildly, and then, with a pathetic thud, the entire pile scattered across the linoleum floor. Papers fluttered like lost birds, and the boy, his face burning crimson, knelt frantically, trying to gather his scattered belongings. A ripple of snickers spread through the passing crowd. Several older students simply stepped over his outstretched hand, their indifference a colder sting than any direct insult. A group of jocks, flexing their backpacks, laughed derisively as they strode past, deliberately bumping a few of the already scattered books further down the hall. The boy's shoulders slumped, a silent tremor running through his small frame. He looked up, his eyes pleading, but no one stopped. Serena, who had witnessed the entire scene unfold from her vantage point near the stairwell, felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. The callousness, the casual cruelty of the bystanders, resonated with something deep within her. She knew that feeling of being helpless, invisible in a different, more painful way. Her first instinct, honed through years of self-preservation, was to remain a ghost, to walk past, to blend in. She had vowed to herself that she would never attract attention, never invite conflict. But as she watched the boy's trembling hands struggle with a heavy textbook, a flicker of something stronger, an old, almost forgotten imperative stirred within her. It wasn't pity, but a quiet, powerful empathy for the vulnerable, a sense of inherent justice that refused to be ignored. Without a word, without a glance at the gawking students, Serena stepped forward. Her movements were fluid, economical, almost as if she were a dancer navigating a crowded stage. She knelt gracefully beside the boy, her dark hoodie briefly shadowing his hunched form. Her hands, long and capable, moved with a surprising swiftness and precision, scooping up the textbooks, gathering the stray papers, smoothing out a crumpled homework assignment. She worked silently, methodically, her eyes focused only on the task, her presence a calming anchor in the storm of the chaotic hallway. She didn't offer words of comfort, didn't make a show of her assistance. She simply collected the scattered remnants of his academic life and, with a gentle, almost imperceptible motion, stacked them neatly back into his trembling arms. The boy looked up at her, his eyes wide with surprise and a profound gratitude that spoke volumes in the absence of words. Serena offered only a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, a fleeting acknowledgement of his silent thanks, before rising and seamlessly melting back into the flow of students, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. She left behind only the stunned silence of the boy and a lingering sense of quiet wonder. Later that day, in the buzzing cafeteria, Serena spotted the same boy. He was sitting alone at a small, isolated table, picking forlornly at his bland school lunch. The earlier humiliation still clung to him like a pall. Serena, her own book open, continued to eat her lunch, seemingly oblivious. But as she finished, she made a deliberate yet subtle detour. She walked past the row of vending machines, not stopping, then casually veered towards the boy's table. In one fluid, almost imperceptible motion, she placed a carton of chocolate milk and a packet of his favorite brand of potato chips. She'd noticed him eyeing them earlier, on the corner of his table. She didn't pause, didn't make eye contact, didn't break her stride. She simply continued walking, blending into the cafeteria crowd, leaving the small gifts as if they had appeared by magic. The boy looked up, his eyes widening at the unexpected bounty. He looked around, saw Serena's back as she disappeared, and a faint, hesitant smile touched his lips. It was a small act, easily overlooked, but for the boy, it was a profound gesture of kindness in a world that had felt cold and indifferent. This quiet, unassuming act of generosity, performed without a hint of expectation or a desire for recognition, was Leo's quintessential save the cat moment. It demonstrated her deep empathy, her unwavering kindness, and a remarkable ability to connect with and uplift those often overlooked by society, all while maintaining her carefully cultivated anonymity. It painted a clear picture of Serena, a girl of profound integrity, quiet strength, and an unwavering commitment to helping others, a soul rich in purpose rather than possessions. Beneath Serena Jenkins's quiet exterior, the perpetually pulled-up hoodie and the seemingly innocuous earbuds, lay a past that pulsed with a raw, disciplined energy. It was a history few knew, a world she had deliberately left behind, yet one that continued to subtly shape her every move. She carried a small, faded tattoo on the inside of her left wrist, a complex, almost ancient-looking symbol that resembled a coiled dragon, or a tribal mark of immense power. It was usually hidden beneath the cuff of her long-sleeved shirts, a personal secret, a permanent reminder of a life once lived in a very different arena. When she moved, even in the most mundane acts, reaching for a book, setting down her tray, turning a corner in the hallway, there was an almost unsettling fluidity, a subtle balance and economical grace that went beyond mere efficiency. Her steps were silent, her turns precise, her body shifting with an inherent understanding of weight distribution and momentum. It was the unconscious elegance of a practiced athlete, a mastery of physical form that was deeply ingrained, almost muscle memory. She often found herself unconsciously checking her watch, particularly at certain times of day. 5 a.m., when the first light of dawn used to signal the start of brutal training sessions. 3 p.m., the peak of an afternoon sparring session. 8 p.m., the time for meditation and cool down. These were phantom rhythms, echoes of a life dedicated to rigorous physical and mental discipline. When a loud, unexpected noise would erupt, a locker slamming particularly hard, a shouted argument in the hall, her hands would instinctively clench into fists, her knuckles turning white, her muscles tensing. It was a primal, almost involuntary response, a flash of an old fight-or-flight instinct, instantly suppressed by years of rigid self-control. She would take a deep breath, her dark eyes briefly narrowing, a hint of steel entering their depths before she quickly relaxed, forcing herself back into her chosen state of placid detachment. Sometimes, passing the school gym, where the thud of basketballs and the squeak of sneakers on the polished floor filled the air, she would pause, her gaze drifting through the open doors. She'd observe the clumsy, uncoordinated movements of the student-athletes, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of something akin to amusement, or perhaps a wistful recognition, crossing her features. Her own body, even while standing still, would subconsciously perform tiny, precise adjustments, a subtle shift of her hips, a minimal rotation of her shoulders, a perfect centering of her balance. These weren't overt displays, but unconscious reflexes, the quiet hum of a perfectly tuned machine in repose. These small, seemingly insignificant details, the hidden tattoo, the phantom rhythms of her past, the instinctive fist clenching, and the almost imperceptible grace in her everyday movements, served as the planting of a seed of mystery. They whispered of a formidable past, a hidden talent, a story waiting to be uncovered, subtly preparing the reader for the shocking revelation to come. The quiet, unassuming new girl, the one everyone dismissed, was, in truth, a brutal fighter, a legend in disguise. Her calm exterior, a deliberate refuge from a spotlight she had once known, and a power she had painstakingly learned to control. The hum of Northwood High's lunchtime cafeteria was usually a dull, comforting backdrop to Serena's self-imposed isolation. Today, however, a discordant note cut through the usual clatter of trays and muffled conversations. It was the high-pitched, insistent voice of Brittany the Queen Bee Evans, amplified by the echo of the sprawling room. Brittany, with her perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and an entourage of equally fashionable, equally catty girls, ruled the school's social hierarchy with an iron fist disguised in a velvet glove. Her confidence, however, was a brittle facade, built on a foundation of insecurity rooted in a turbulent home life. A perpetually bickering set of parents, an older brother who constantly flirted with trouble. These internal conflicts manifested in a desperate need for control, which she exerted by dominating and, more often than not, tormenting those she perceived as weaker. Serena, with her quiet demeanor and seemingly unassuming presence, had, unfortunately, become her latest target. Brittany saw Serena's silence not as strength, but as a glaring vulnerability, an invitation for exploitation. The taunts had started subtly enough. Muffled giggles when Serena walked by, snide remarks about her plain clothes or her perpetually hidden hair. "Look at the new girl," Brittany would drawl loud enough for Serena to hear, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Always got her nose in a book. Doesn't she know how to live?" Or a gentle, deliberate nudge in the crowded hallway, accompanied by a saccharine, "Oops, so sorry. Didn't see you there. You're so quiet." Serena, though feeling a cold knot of irritation tighten in her stomach, had mastered the art of impassivity. She would lower her head further, adjusting her hoodie, tightening her grip on her book, and simply keep walking. She had cultivated her invisibility for years, and confronting Brittany would only shatter the fragile peace she had painstakingly constructed. Every fiber of her being urged her to avoid confrontation, to remain unseen, untouched by the petty cruelties of this new, seemingly tame environment. The dormant lion within her stirred, but the instinct to remain hidden, to preserve her anonymity, was still paramount. Brittany, however, was not accustomed to being ignored. Serena's quiet stoicism, far from deflecting the bullying, only fueled Brittany's escalating frustration. To the Queen Bee, indifference was an insult, a direct challenge to her undisputed authority. Serena's refusal to react, her seemingly unbreakable calm, was perceived as a personal affront, a subtle act of rebellion that demanded a public, crushing response. Brittany needed to reassert her dominance, to break this new girl's composure and force her into submission, proving to everyone, and perhaps to herself, that her reign remained unchallenged. The whispers among her clique, the curious glances from other students who noted Serena's quiet defiance, intensified Brittany's resolve to shatter the new girl's facade. The cafeteria, typically the loudest and most chaotic hub of the school, fell into an unnatural hush as Brittany orchestrated her grand performance. It was prime time, packed with hundreds of students, their eyes darting between their trays and the unfolding drama. Brittany, flanked by her two giggling lieutenants, stalked towards Serena's isolated table. "Well, well, well," she began, her voice sugary sweet, yet laced with a venomous edge. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence without being glued to a book. Though I suppose that hoodie is still your best friend, isn't it?" Before Serena could even process the words, Brittany's hand shot out, not in a direct attack, but with a deliberate, calculated malice. Her palm swept across Serena's tray, sending her sandwich, a carton of milk and a handful of potato chips skittering across the table and onto Serena's pristine white t-shirt. A cold, wet stain bloomed instantly across the fabric. A collective gasp rippled through the cafeteria, followed by a tense silence. Serena froze, the warmth of the spilled milk seeping into her shirt, the humiliation a bitter taste in her mouth. Her eyes, usually veiled, flickered, revealing a dangerous glint that few had ever seen. Brittany, oblivious to the subtle shift in Serena's demeanor, leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, yet loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oopsie. So clumsy of me. My apologies, new girl. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just too scared to fight back?" She straightened up, a triumphant smirk twisting her lips, her eyes daring Serena to react. The challenge hung in the air, thick and suffocating. This public humiliation, this blatant act of aggression, was the point of no return. Serena could no longer simply retreat, no longer hide behind her book or her hoodie. To do so would be to accept the role of victim, to validate Brittany's cruel dominance. The carefully constructed wall of anonymity, the peace she had so fiercely guarded, had been irrevocably shattered. Her past, the formidable skills she had long suppressed, stirred within her, demanding to be acknowledged. The quiet girl was gone. A different Serena was about to emerge. The cafeteria, which had erupted into a chorus of nervous whispers, fell silent. The tension was so thick you could almost taste it, a bitter mix of anticipation and disbelief. Brittany stood over Serena, her triumphant smirk a mask of cruel satisfaction. Her entourage giggled behind her, a small, vicious Greek chorus in the drama she had orchestrated. "So, what's it gonna be, girl?" Brittany taunted, her voice a low sneer. "Clean that up, or are you just gonna stand there looking pathetic?" She expected tears, a mumbled apology, a public retreat. She expected Serena to fold. But Serena didn't fold. She didn't move at all. The cold, wet sensation of spilled milk seeping into her shirt was a physical anchor, grounding her in the present. Her head, which had been bowed, slowly lifted. She met Brittany's gaze, and for the first time, Brittany saw what was truly in those eyes. Not fear, but a cold, hard stillness that sent a shiver down her spine. The laughter of her friends died in their throats. Serena reached down, and with a controlled, deliberate motion, picked up her ruined sandwich from the floor. She held it for a moment, its soggy weight a symbol of her violated peace, then placed it gently on the tray. It was a gesture of quiet, unyielding defiance, a refusal to be broken. Brittany, unnerved by the unexpected calm, felt her facade of confidence begin to crack. She needed to reassert control, to escalate the conflict to something she understood. She took a step closer, her foot kicking Serena's chair. "Don't you have anything to say?" she snarled, her voice losing its playful edge. Serena's response was not in words, but in motion. It was a movement that was so subtle, so seemingly effortless, that it went unseen by most. As the chair tilted, Serena's body reacted with a lightning-fast, almost imperceptible shift. She didn't just catch the chair. Her hand shot out, not to block, but to grasp the back of the chair with a strength that was completely at odds with her slender frame. With a slight, practiced twist of her wrist, she pushed the chair forward just enough to disrupt Brittany's footing, causing her to take a half-step back, her body momentarily off balance. The entire exchange took less than a second. It was a fluid, graceful, and perfectly executed act of defensive control, a blend of power and precision that had no place in a high school cafeteria. It was the movement of a trained fighter, a master who could read an opponent's intent and counter it with minimal effort. This was Serena's first quiet revelation in an unwilling situation. She hadn't sought to show off. She had simply responded to a threat with an innate, ingrained instinct. The brief, almost imperceptible exchange went unnoticed by most of the chattering students, who were already turning back to their conversations. But it was not missed by Coach Miller, the burly, no-nonsense physical education teacher and a former professional martial artist, who had been eating his lunch nearby. His sharp eyes, trained to spot nuance in movement, narrowed. He saw the flicker of Serena's wrist, the precise, economical use of force, the way she had subtly disrupted Brittany's balance without even touching her. The movement was familiar to him, a ghost of a technique he had seen in the upper echelons of professional combat sports. His fork, laden with macaroni and cheese, stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked at Serena, then back at Brittany, a faint, growing suspicion forming in his mind. He had been a champion for a reason. He knew what he was seeing, and it wasn't the clumsy reaction of a timid new girl. Brittany, however, felt only a surge of indignant fury. Her pride, her carefully constructed image of invincibility, had been subtly, yet publicly, wounded by a girl she had written off as pathetic. She felt foolish, having stumbled for a split second, and her inability to comprehend how or why it had happened only made her more enraged. She refused to acknowledge the skill, choosing instead to believe it was a random accident, a lucky reflex. This brief, almost effortless countermove, rather than deterring her, fueled her arrogance further. This was the moment the antagonist, Type A, truly felt threatened, and her desire to reassert her dominance intensified tenfold. Brittany's eyes, now filled with a cold, desperate rage, found Serena's. She took a deep breath, and her voice, usually so confident and theatrical, was now a low, dangerous growl. "You think you're tough, huh?" she spat, her face flushing crimson. "Think you can push me around? Fine. Let's see how tough you really are. After school, at the basketball court, one-on-one, you and me. No more games." She puffed out her chest, trying to reclaim her intimidating aura. She gestured towards the main gym, a public space where dozens of students were sure to gather. "Everyone's gonna be there. We'll see who's really scared to fight back then." Her words dripped with condescension, an unmistakable challenge meant to belittle Serena and crush her unexpected display of skill. She wasn't just asking, she was demanding, trying to force Serena into a fight she couldn't possibly win in front of the entire school. Serena slowly straightened, her eyes never leaving Brittany's. She felt the gaze of every student in the cafeteria, the tension of the moment so palpable it was almost suffocating. She knew the consequences of accepting this challenge. Her anonymity, her carefully constructed peace, would be shattered forever. But she also knew the consequences of refusing. She would be branded a coward, and the bullying would only intensify. This was a battle she had long avoided, a war she had tried to flee. But now it was knocking on her door, demanding an answer. The quiet girl who had sought peace had been pushed too far. She took a deep breath. Her eyes flickered closed for a brief, almost imperceptible moment of acceptance. The hoodie, which had been a shield, now felt like a cage. She reached up, slowly took out her earbuds, and, with a quiet finality, tucked them into her pocket. The silence that followed was broken only by her next, soft words. "Fine," she said, her voice clear and calm, a single word that carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "I'll be there." The quiet before the storm was over. The storm itself was about to begin. The lunch bell's usual chime, a signal for freedom and social reprieve, now rang with a sinister finality. Its echo through Northwood High's hallways felt less like a release and more like a summons to an inevitable confrontation. The designated battlefield was the outdoor basketball court, a sprawling expanse of cracked asphalt and faded white lines, usually echoing with the rhythmic bounce of a ball. Today, however, it stood silent, ominous, transformed into Serena's arena. It was a space typically reserved for athletic prowess and competitive spirit, now poised to host a very different kind of contest. A brutal public spectacle designed to break a new girl's will. Students, drawn by the irresistible scent of impending drama, converged on the court, forming a semicircle around the center line. Their faces were a mix of morbid curiosity, eager anticipation, and a few scattered expressions of genuine concern. This was no ordinary schoolyard fight. This was a public trial, and Serena, the quiet newcomer, was squarely in the spotlight. As Serena walked towards the court, she felt the weight of every single gaze upon her. Each whispered comment, each speculative stare, felt like a physical burden. Her usual shield of anonymity had been ripped away, leaving her exposed, vulnerable. She was a solitary figure against a sea of faces, a lone warrior facing not just Brittany and her clique, but the collective skepticism of an entire student body. No one, save for the keen-eyed Coach Miller, truly believed she had a chance. She was slender, seemingly unassuming, confronting Brittany, who, despite her own lack of formal training, was known for her aggressive street-fighting tactics and sheer, unadulterated nastiness. The odds were impossibly stacked against her, emphasizing the chilling solitude of the hero in this daunting confrontation. She was utterly alone, facing not just a bully, but the overwhelming expectation of her own inevitable defeat. Brittany, already on the court, began stretching dramatically, preening for the growing crowd. Her two lieutenants stood by her, whispering words of encouragement, their giggles brittle and sharp. "All right, new girl," Brittany shouted, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "You ready to learn your place?" She struck a menacing pose, her fists loosely clenched. A senior student, known for his loudmouth and eagerness to stir trouble, stepped forward, appointed himself as the impromptu referee, though his loyalties were clearly with Brittany. "All right, ladies, just one round," he announced, puffing out his chest. "Until someone taps out or can't stand anymore, no time limit." The declaration of no time limit, ending only upon submission or incapacitation, ratcheted up the tension to an almost unbearable degree. This wasn't a quick scuffle. It was an open-ended, brutal challenge, explicitly designed to prolong Serena's inevitable defeat and maximize Brittany's triumphant display. The pressure on Serena intensified exponentially. She wasn't just facing a bully. She was facing a grueling, potentially endless ordeal designed to break her physically and emotionally. The very air around her crackled with the weight of that expectation, a palpable force pushing down on her. Serena reached up and, with a subtle movement, removed her hoodie, letting it fall loosely around her shoulders. She then calmly reached for her ears, pulling out the small Bluetooth earbuds and tucking them carefully into her pocket. As her head emerged fully, her dark, lustrous braids swayed slightly. The crowd murmured, a ripple of curiosity passing through them. Her eyes, now completely unveiled, met Brittany's, and the faint, almost imperceptible dragon tattoo on her left wrist, previously hidden by her sleeve, became subtly visible as she adjusted her shirt. It was a fleeting glimpse, but for those who noticed, it was a sudden, jarring detail, out of place on such a seemingly quiet girl. Brittany scoffed, dismissive. "Finally shedding the shell, huh? About time. Doesn't matter. You're still just a scared little mouse." She adopted a wide, aggressive street-fighting stance, radiating crude power. "Don't say I didn't warn you, new girl. You asked for this." But Serena merely took a deep, centering breath, her posture shifting almost imperceptibly. Her slender frame, which had seemed fragile moments before, now carried an unexpected solidity, a subtle balance that defied her apparent slightness. Her feet, clad in simple sneakers, found a familiar, almost instinctive position on the worn asphalt. It wasn't a martial arts stance taught at Northwood High. It was something older, more primal, yet utterly disciplined. A profound stillness settled over her, an almost eerie calm in the face of the mounting aggression. This was the ultimate test, the moment where Serena would either crumble under the weight of expectations and prejudice, or reveal the dormant, formidable legend within. The air was thick with anticipation, the very silence of the student body thrumming with the unspoken question. What would the quiet new girl do? The outdoor basketball court, baking under the relentless midday sun, felt less like a sports arena and more like an ancient coliseum. Every eye in the tightly packed semicircle of students was fixed on the center, where Brittany, the Queen Bee Evans, stood, her face a mask of aggressive confidence. She gestured impatiently for Serena to step forward. "Come on, new girl. Let's get this pathetic little show over with. Don't waste my time." Her voice, sharp and cutting, carried easily through the hushed crowd. Brittany's posse, a trio of girls with identical perfect ponytails and sneers, egged her on, their high-pitched encouragement fueling her bravado. They expected a swift, brutal humiliation, a clear reassertion of their queen's dominance over the quiet, dark-skinned newcomer. The air crackled with a cruel anticipation, thick enough to taste. The makeshift referee, a loud-mouthed senior, signaled the start of the fight. Brittany lunged immediately, abandoning any pretense of fairness. Her movements were raw, unrefined street fighting, but fueled by pure, unadulterated aggression. She threw a wild haymaker punch aimed squarely at Serena's face, followed by a clumsy but powerful kick directed at her midsection. Her attacks were relentless, designed to overwhelm through sheer force and intimidation. She moved with a desperate, almost feral energy, determined to land a crushing blow that would end the spectacle swiftly and decisively. The force of her swings whistled through the air, carrying the palpable threat of impact. Serena, however, didn't flinch. She didn't block with brute force, nor did she attempt to counterattack with anything resembling a strike. Instead, her body moved with an uncanny, almost ethereal fluidity, shifting, weaving, and ducking with an effortless grace that made Brittany's powerful, flailing attacks look clumsy and ineffective. She flowed around Brittany's blows, her movements so subtle and economical that they seemed to defy physics. She was a whisper in the whirlwind, an unmoving calm in the heart of the storm. The crowd murmured, confused. Brittany's vicious attacks, meant to land devastatingly, found only empty air, leaving her off balance, frustrated, and increasingly exposed. As Brittany's frustration mounted, turning her aggressive lunges into desperate flails, Serena performed a seemingly insignificant act. She calmly reached up and, with a subtle movement, ran her fingers through her braids, subtly exposing the small faded dragon tattoo on her left wrist. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture, but for those with keen eyes, it was a sudden jarring detail, a powerful, intricate symbol on the wrist of the quiet, unassuming new girl. A few scattered whispers broke through the hushed anticipation as students exchanged puzzled glances. Her posture subtly shifted, transforming from defensive to something ancient, primal, yet utterly controlled. She wasn't aggressive, she was simply there, an immovable object, a perfectly balanced force. She began to respond, not with attacks, but with perfectly timed parries and redirects, using Brittany's own frantic momentum against her, subtly throwing her off balance, making her stumble. She revealed just enough, a glimpse of pure, unadulterated mastery, enough to confuse and frustrate Brittany without actually hurting her. The subtle grace in Serena's movements, the effortlessness with which she evaded every blow, slowly began to shift the perception of the onlookers. The whispers grew louder, filled now with a mixture of confusion and dawning awe. Brittany, panting, her face a mask of furious desperation, felt a cold dread begin to creep into her arrogant heart. She had thrown everything she had, every wild swing, every ounce of untrained strength. Yet the new girl remained untouched, almost mocking her with her effortless defense. Her frustration boiled into a desperate fury. "Stand still, you freak!" she shrieked, abandoning all pretense of a fight for fun. She launched into a final all-out assault, a rapid-fire succession of desperate punches and kicks, designed to incapacitate any opponent through sheer brute force. This was her last resort, her ultimate, seemingly unstoppable barrage, guaranteed to end the fight. She moved with a savage intensity, determined to land a knockout blow and reclaim her shattered pride, to finally break this infuriatingly calm girl. Serena, seemingly cornered against the edge of the basketball court, simply closed her eyes for a split second, an ancient calm settling over her features. As Brittany's final, wild punch aimed for her head, Serena performed a movement so breathtakingly fast and precise, it was almost imperceptible. She didn't just dodge, she slipped through an infinitesimally small gap in Brittany's attack, a tiny window of opportunity that only a true master could have seen, much less exploited. Then, in the same fluid motion, her open palm, moving with the speed of a viper, gently touched Brittany's solar plexus, a precise, controlled tap that carried no force, no impact, yet had an immediate, devastating effect. Brittany froze mid-swing, her eyes wide with shock. Her powerful momentum vanished, her body stiffening as if she'd hit an invisible wall. She stumbled backward, completely off balance, not from impact, but from the sudden, inexplicable disruption of her core. She tripped over her own feet, arms flailing wildly, and crashed to the asphalt in a heap, utterly defeated not by brute force, but by the sheer, unquantifiable mastery of Serena's counter. She lay there, stunned, humiliated, completely incapacitated not by pain, but by the shattering realization of her own utter inadequacy. This was the breathless moment, the impossible maneuver, the non-violent but utterly decisive victory, the silent roar of the legend echoing through the stunned silence. The entire student body, moments before a cacophony of murmurs and whispers, held its collective breath. Then, a single, collective, awe-struck gasp rippled through the stunned crowd. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, as everyone tried to process what they had just witnessed. Brittany, the invincible Queen Bee, lay on the ground, not knocked out, not injured, but completely defeated by a touch, a mere whisper of motion. The collective silence shattered. A ripple of murmurs, hushed and disbelieving, swept through the throng. "Did you see that? How did she? She didn't even touch her." The murmurs swelled into excited chatter, then erupted into a spontaneous, thunderous ovation. Students, previously curious or even hostile, now rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, their faces alight with a mixture of shock, awe, and burgeoning respect. Brittany's posse, previously arrogant, now looked utterly bewildered, their faces pale with the sudden shift in power. Coach Miller, the physical education teacher, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, slowly walked toward the center of the court. He looked at Serena, his gaze filled with profound reverence, then subtly, almost unconsciously, glanced at the tattoo on her wrist. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement of profound respect. "Serena," Miller whispered, his voice thick with emotion, loud enough for only Serena and a few nearby students to hear. "The dragon's mark. I knew it. It truly is you. They called you the Shadow Queen back then, didn't they?" Brittany, still on the ground, her face contorted in a silent scream of humiliation, could only watch, her world crumbling around her. The public vindication of Serena Jenkins, the unassuming new girl, was complete. She had not only defeated her arrogant bully, but had reclaimed her legendary status, proving that true power lay not in outward show, but in profound, understated mastery. The seismic shockwave of Serena's victory reverberated through Northwood High like a persistent tremor. The meticulously crafted social hierarchy, once dominated by Brittany the Queen Bee Evans, crumbled almost instantly. Brittany's very name, once whispered with a mixture of fear and admiration, now became synonymous with public humiliation. The video of the fight, shot by a dozen smartphones, spread like wildfire, not just through the school, but across the town and eventually online. It was a brutal, visual testament to her arrogance and ultimate defeat. Her carefully cultivated popularity evaporated overnight. Her former friends, sensing the shift in power, quickly distanced themselves, leaving her isolated and exposed. The casual cruelty she had so readily dished out returned to her tenfold, manifesting as whispered taunts, ostracization in the hallways, and a complete loss of her social standing. Her reign was over, and the very hubris that had fueled her relentless bullying had, in the end, orchestrated her spectacular and public downfall. She finished the school year in miserable isolation, transferring to a different district the following fall, a shadow of her former self, her name a cautionary tale whispered among the students. In the days that followed the fight, the atmosphere around Serena underwent a profound transformation. The invisible barrier she had so painstakingly erected around herself dissolved, replaced by a tangible aura of respect and quiet awe. Students who had once given her a wide berth now approached her with shy smiles, offering compliments or simply a respectful nod. Michael, the young boy she had helped in the cafeteria, became a quiet, constant presence near her, his eyes shining with open admiration. He even started carrying a small book, hoping to emulate her quiet strength. He was a perfect example of antagonist. Type B's genuine remorse and subsequent support, having initially been part of the indifferent crowd but now completely on her side. Coach Miller, his keen eyes gleaming with a mix of satisfaction and wonder, wasted no time. A week after the fight, he found Serena in the library, tucked away in her usual corner, a new book in her hands. He didn't boom or lecture, he spoke softly, respectfully. "Serena," he began, his voice laced with an undeniable reverence. "What you did out there, that was mastery. I haven't seen that kind of control, that kind of precision, since my own competitive days. And even then, it was rare. Your technique, the dragon's mark, I only ever read about that in old texts." He paused, then continued, his voice more earnest. "Northwood High has a small martial arts club. We're not much, mostly beginners. But if you would consider being an assistant instructor, you could teach them so much more than just moves. You could teach them discipline, respect, what true power really means." Serena hesitated. The thought of stepping back into any kind of spotlight, even a small one, was daunting. She had spent years cultivating invisibility, seeking peace away from the pressures and scrutiny that came with her formidable abilities. But then she looked up from her book at the faces around her, the shy smiles of newfound respect, the hopeful gaze of Coach Miller, the earnest devotion of Michael. She realized this wasn't about fame, it was about stewardship. It was an opportunity to teach not just fighting techniques, but the deeper philosophy of self-control, integrity, and humility that she embodied. It was a chance to guide, to protect, to prevent others from falling into the traps she had seen. This was a new opportunity for Serena, a chance to fulfill a purpose that transcended personal comfort, allowing her to nurture a new generation of martial artists and shape their understanding of strength. She nodded slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "It would be my honor, Coach Miller." Weeks later, as twilight settled over Northwood, Serena and Coach Miller sat cross-legged on the polished mats of the small school gym, a quiet, almost sacred peace settling between them. The sounds of the newly formed martial arts club, a gentle rhythm of practiced movements and soft commands, drifted from the next room. "You know," Coach Miller began, his voice soft, contemplative, "when I saw you move out there, I knew you weren't just some kid. The way you handled Brittany, that wasn't just fighting. That was art. That was wisdom." He looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Why did you ever stop, Serena? Why did you hide that kind of talent?" Serena sighed, a long, deep exhale. She looked at the faint dragon tattoo on her wrist, no longer hidden beneath her sleeve. "I ran, Coach. After a series of competitions, after the spotlight became too much, after I realized that even in victory, there was a kind of emptiness, a constant pressure to prove yourself, to be the best, the brutal fighter. I wanted peace. I wanted to disappear into the quiet, away from the expectations, away from the endless fights, away from the constant need to prove my strength." She paused, a flicker of old pain in her eyes. "I found a different kind of peace, a hidden one, in simply existing, in working with my mind, in being invisible. But true strength," Coach Miller countered gently, his eyes wise and knowing, "is not found in hiding, but in knowing when to step forward. You taught Brittany a lesson she desperately needed, Serena, and you reminded everyone here what true martial arts really mean. Not just power, but character. The world still needs your wisdom." This contemplative dialogue solidified Serena's past, her reasons for retreat, and her newfound acceptance of her purpose. Serena nodded, a serene expression settling on her face. She had fought her last battle, not against an opponent, but against her own desire for invisibility. She had found her peace, not by retreating from the world, but by choosing to re-engage with it on her own terms, using her formidable abilities not for competition, but for guidance and growth. 2 years later, the vibrant hum of Northwood High's gym had replaced the quiet solitude Serena Jenkins once sought. The worn basketball court, once an arena of forced confrontation, was now a place of joyful discipline, echoing with the soft thuds of sparring partners and the focused breathing of students mastering their forms. Serena, no longer merely the new girl, stood at the heart of it all. Her signature hoodie and hidden earbuds were gone, replaced by a comfortable, loose-fitting training gi. Her posture was not just straight, but effortlessly powerful. Her movements fluid and purposeful. She was now the respected co-instructor of the school's burgeoning martial arts club, a figure revered not just for her legendary skills, but for the profound lessons in self-control, respect, and inner strength that she quietly imparted. She had attracted a new generation of students, drawn not by the promise of brute force, but by the allure of genuine self-improvement and the profound wisdom she exuded. Her influence, however, stretched far beyond the gym mats. Serena had channeled her past experiences into a tangible force for good, establishing the Iron Blossom Initiative. This nonprofit program was dedicated to providing free self-defense classes and mentorship to vulnerable teenage girls in the community, especially those facing bullying or difficult home environments. She believed that true strength wasn't just about physical prowess, but about cultivating inner resilience, self-worth, and the courage to stand up for oneself and others. The initiative covered everything from training equipment to transportation, ensuring that financial barriers didn't prevent any girl from accessing these empowering lessons. Serena didn't seek public accolades for this work. She rarely spoke about her past as the Shadow Queen. Instead, the stories of the girls she helped, girls who found their voice, their confidence, and a renewed sense of security, became her greatest testament. She often visited local community centers, sharing her journey not as a tale of personal triumph, but as a testament to the transformative power of perseverance and the importance of finding one's true path, even if it meant embracing a spotlight once shunned. She had truly found her paying it forward calling, enriching her community and building a legacy far grander than any championship title. Michael, the young boy Serena had helped in the cafeteria, had flourished under her quiet mentorship. He was no longer the timid seventh grader, but a disciplined, articulate sophomore, now one of the martial arts club's most promising students and Serena's devoted assistant. He'd meticulously set up mats, organize equipment, and even lead warm-up drills, mimicking Serena's calm, authoritative demeanor. Their bond was one of deep mutual respect, a testament to the quiet guidance Serena had offered years ago. Michael often recounted the story of how Serena had silently intervened that day in the hallway and cafeteria, how she had later humbled Brittany, and how she continued to inspire him daily, a narrative that reinforced the deep impact of her understated heroism. One serene afternoon, as the Northwood High gym buzzed with the controlled movements of a full martial arts class, Serena stood in the center of the main mat, bathed in the soft golden light filtering through the high windows. Her students, a diverse group of all ages and backgrounds, stood in perfectly aligned rows before her, their faces eager, their postures attentive. They executed a series of traditional bows, a rhythmic display of respect and discipline. Serena, without her hoodie, without her earbuds, her subtle dragon tattoo visible on her wrist, returned their bow with a profound sense of peace. She looked completely at ease, her movements fluid, her dark eyes clear and full of a quiet wisdom. Her gaze drifted to the wall, where a newly framed photograph had been placed prominently alongside the school's sports team pictures. A candid shot of Serena Jenkins herself, taken during a recent training session with her Iron Blossom Initiative girls. In the photo, she was demonstrating a defensive maneuver, her slender frame coiled with contained power, her eyes gleaming with profound insight and unwavering purpose. It was a powerful final symbolic image, signifying not just the journey of a girl who overcame bullies, but the seamless merging of her past and present as the Shadow Queen, transformed into a guiding light. The brutal fighter had indeed returned, not as a champion in combat, but as an enduring master whose wisdom and humility continued to light the path for countless others, solidifying her second spring, a time of profound fulfillment and lasting legacy. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.